Welcome to Fabian's Zeitgeist. I'm your host, Fabian Kira, mechanical engineer by training, global observer by obsession, and professional overthinker by default. This podcast is my way of decoding current events, economics, politics, and the societal ripple effects that shape our world. I'm not here to pretend objectivity. I've lived, learned, and accumulated biases like anyone else. What you'll hear is my unfiltered perspective, honest, flawed, and open to contradiction. As Socrates once said, I know that I know nothing. You do disagree to my opinions. That's good. It means you're thinking. So, no matter where you are, no matter if you're young or old, a woman or a man, you're white, black, Asian, blue for all it matters. If free speech and unapologetic thinking are your thing, then welcome home. With that out of the way, let's jump straight into today's topic. Welcome to another emotionally charged episode of Fabian's Zeitgeist. Today, we are diving into one of the most personal, emotional, and ethically complex topic of our time, euthanasia. That's why I will start with a disclaimer. This podcast episode, actually all of the episodes I've done or I plan to do, is intended for mature audiences and is meant to inform and provoke thought, not to advocate for any particular course of action. If you are under 18 or you are struggling with suicidal thoughts or emotional distress, I strongly urge you to speak with a trusted adult or seek professional help. Please remember, you are not alone and help is always available. This topic isn't abstract for me. It's a subject that has haunted me for more than 30 years. The first thoughts I had on euthanasia was when I was in high school. I still remember the first time I saw Metallica's video for One, the music video for One. The haunting images of a soldier trapped in his own body, tied to a bed, unable to speak, to move, or connect with the world. It shook me. Later, I watched the movie Johnny Got His Gun, the film those scenes from Metallica's video came from. And it left an even deeper mark. That kind of existence, alive but not living, represents for me the most hellish nightmare imaginable. Even more hellish than not existing at all. Later in life, I witnessed my father slowly decay from illness, becoming bedridden and unable to walk for several years. I saw my mother devote herself to his care, day after day, carrying a weight that few outside the situation could ever understand. They suffered together, quietly, lovingly, but painfully. Even in his final days, as I was sitting by his dying bed, being aware that there is no turning back for him, my father told me, between tears, that he wanted to live and was afraid to die. He still clung to life, even with all the physical suffering. That was his choice, and I deeply respected it. But as I watched, I came to a difficult realization. If I were in his condition, I would not want to continue living. I wouldn't want to live trapped in a body that no longer works, completely dependent, unable to move. I believe people should have the legal and medical means to end their life in peace, without pain and without shame, when they decide the time is right. But I'm also deeply concerned about the forms of pressure that can creep in from family, from society, from guilt, from money. The pressure can then quietly push people toward a decision they may not truly want to make. So, today, we're going to explore this topic, the euthanasia, from several angles. We're going to look at some historical background and the legal status of euthanasia across the globe, the religious perspectives, a few disturbing and thought-provoking real-life cases, and finally, my personal reflections on the delicate balance between autonomy and pressure. Let's begin with a little bit of historical context and what it means to die a good death. The word euthanasia comes from the Greek eu, meaning good, and thanatos, meaning death. The concept of a good death, one that is dignified, painless, and chosen, is not new. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Plato and Seneca discussed the moral permissibility of ending one's life in case of unbearable suffering or terminal illness. For the Stoics, suicide in the face of extreme suffering was a rational, even noble act. In ancient Rome, this view was echoed in public life. Terminally ill citizens could request assistance in ending their lives, and in some cases, doctors would comply without legal or religious punishment. But with the rise of Christianity in Europe, the acceptance of euthanasia faded. Life was now seen more and more as a gift from God, and only God had a right to end it. Suffering, especially in Catholic theology, became something meaningful, an opportunity to atone for your sins, and by doing so, to come closer to God. Still, the human instinct for mercy persisted. On medieval battlefields, soldiers would deliver the coup de grâce, literally the blow of mercy, to end the suffering of comrades mortally wounded. Though religious doctrine forbade it, battlefield reality often overruled it. In the early 20th century, euthanasia societies began forming in Britain and the United States, advocating for the rights of the terminally ill. But this movement suffered a deep setback during the Nazi era, when the term euthanasia was hijacked and used to justify the Aktion T4 program. Aktion T4, Action T4, was the code name for the systematic mass murder of people with physical, mental, and emotional disabilities, carried out by the Nazi regime between 1940 and 1941, a state-sponsored mass killing of disabled and mentally ill individuals. Over 70,000 people were murdered in the name of mercy. Though officially halted in 1941 due to public outcry, including from the church, the killings continued in a decentralized manner until 1945, with a total number of victims estimated at over 200,000. After World War II, the shadow of Nazi atrocities stalled euthanasia debates for decades. But as medicine advanced and life could be prolonged artificially, new ethical questions arose. Could life support be withdrawn? Could pain relief be given, even if it shortened life? In 2001, the Netherlands became the first country to legalize voluntary euthanasia under strict criteria. Belgium, Luxembourg, Canada, Colombia, and New Zealand have since followed with their own laws, though with varying levels of regulation and access. Today, euthanasia is no longer a taboo in many societies, but it is still far from being universally accepted. So let's see what is the legal status across the world as of 2025. In Europe, it is legal and widely accepted in Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, Spain, Portugal, and Switzerland. Germany and France allow passive euthanasia, but not active euthanasia. UK is debating legalization with strong public support, but with political resistance. North America, Canada has one of the most liberal euthanasia laws, including for mental illness. In the US, it's legal in 10 states, including Oregon and California, under strict conditions. Mexico allows passive euthanasia in some states. In South America, Colombia legalized euthanasia in 2015. Ecuador followed in 2024. The other countries in South America remain largely opposed. In Asia, euthanasia is mostly illegal, though India allows passive euthanasia. Japan has no clear law, but some tolerance in practice. South Korea, China, and Thailand prohibit it. Africa, euthanasia in Africa is largely illegal across the continent. South Africa has debated it, but so far there was no law allowing it. In Australia and New Zealand, euthanasia has been legalized under strict guidelines. Religious traditions play a major role in shaping our society's attitudes towards euthanasia, and their perspectives are often nuanced. Let's look at how the major world religions view this subject. The Catholic Church firmly opposes euthanasia and assisted suicide. According to Catholic doctrine, life is sacred from conception to natural death, and only God has the authority to give or take life. Euthanasia is seen as a grave sin, no matter how compassionate the motives might be. However, the Church does recognize the principle of double effect. If a treatment, like strong pain relief, unintentionally hastens death, it can be morally acceptable if the intention is to relieve suffering, not to kill. Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis have both condemned euthanasia as part of what they call the culture of death, in contrast to a culture that upholds life and human dignity. In the Christian Orthodox churches, both Greek and Russian Orthodoxy, they are rejecting euthanasia. They view it as a violation of the commandment, "You shall not kill." You shall not kill even yourself. According to the Orthodox teachings, humans are custodians of life. They don't own it, and the suffering can be part of spiritual purification. Euthanasia is considered either murder, if done without consent, or suicide, if requested, but morally is unacceptable in both cases. Under Protestant religion, the views vary widely. More conservative evangelical churches generally align with Catholic positions. Euthanasia is seen as morally wrong, a rejection of divine sovereignty. However, some mainline Protestant denominations like the United Church of Christ or some part of the Anglican Communion have taken a more compassionate and context-based approach. They argue that in cases of extreme suffering, allowing someone to die with dignity can be a moral act of love. For many Protestants, individual conscience plays a central role in moral decision-making, so there's more diversity within the tradition. In Judaism, euthanasia is strictly forbidden, Life is seen as a gift from God, and intentionally hastening death is considered a murder, regardless of suffering. However, conservative and Reform Judaism are more open to nuance than the Orthodox Judaism. They allow for withholding or withdrawing extraordinary medical interventions when death is imminent and unavoidable. Relief of suffering is a strong moral value, and if prolonging life becomes simply prolonging pain, many rabbis accept letting nature take its course. Under Islam, life is sacred and belongs to Allah. Suicide and any act that deliberately ends life are considered haram, forbidden. The Quran emphasizes patience in suffering and entrusting one's fate to God. However, Islamic scholars do allow withdrawing futile treatment when there is no hope of recovery. If life support only prolongs the dying process, it may be ethically acceptable to stop it. Euthanasia as an active intervention remains largely prohibited under Islam, but passive measures and palliative care are encouraged. Islam emphasizes mercy and non-harm, which allows for some flexibility in end-of-life care without explicitly endorsing euthanasia. Hinduism. Well, Hinduism teaches that life and death are part of the cosmic cycle of samsara, rebirth, governed by karma. Interfering with that cycle by ending one's life prematurely is often seen as spiritually problematic. For ordinary people, euthanasia is generally discouraged, but in the context of spiritual discipline, choosing one's time of death is not entirely foreign. Buddhism emphasizes non-harming, ahimsa, and generally opposes killing, including killing to relieve suffering. However, Buddhism also places a high value on compassion, and intention is everything. In some interpretations, particularly in Western Buddhist ethics, if an act is motivated by deep compassion and not by fear or aversion, it might not generate negative karma. The Dalai Lama has stated that euthanasia should be considered on a case-by-case basis, especially when the person is in great pain and the motivation is pure compassion. In summary, most religious traditions hold life to be sacred and oppose active euthanasia. But at the same time, many offer space for interpretation, for compassionate withdrawal of treatment, palliative care, and dignified dying, especially when death is near and suffering is great. Without claiming that I exhaust all the possible ethical considerations, there are a few that I must say I find troubling for me personally. In Germany and much of Europe, caring for elderly parents is both a personal and social challenge. People are living longer, and many of those final years are marked by decline, illness, or dementia. Retirement homes, Altersheime, are incredibly expensive. Depending on the facility and level of care, monthly costs range from 2,500 to 5,000 euros. Many families can't afford that without draining their savings or relying on the state. Now, imagine being 85 years old and seeing your children struggle. Watching them juggle careers, childcare, and your care. Hearing them sigh with exhaustion, knowing that your presence is a financial and emotional burden. You might not say anything, but you feel it. And little by little, that feeling grows. Questions like, I'm in the way? Maybe it's better for everyone if I go? In this case, is that still a free choice? Or in this case, is euthanasia a form of unspoken coercion? In Norse mythology and Viking folklore, there are tales of the elderly choosing to end their lives by leaping from cliffs. While historians debate whether this was actually ever practiced, the legend reveals something important. The idea that one should make room for the young and die before becoming a burden. Fast forward to today. We no longer talk about jumping off cliffs, but we have clinics. The story is still there. It's only told in a different way. Die with dignity. Don't become dependent. Go out on your own terms before you become a problem. That's not really a true choice. That's society whispering in your ear, your time is up. And that's what scares me. There's another layer to this that I found troubling. As euthanasia becomes more formalized, even ritualized, there's growing expectation that friends and family will attend and support the act. I was even told by a colleague of mine about being asked for his blessing by his parent. I think this decision, even if supported or not by family, is a deeply personal one. And asking your loved ones to sign on your death warrant is a big ask. I know I would never say yes or no if somebody I love would ask me to give them my blessing. I would probably hate them for taking me into this mess. Yet others might appreciate being part of the decision. We are all different after all. Same goes for the farewell parties, at the end of which the star of the party kicks the bucket. For some people may be healing, but for others it's traumatic or deeply uncomfortable. I wouldn't want to be a part of such a grotesque show. And yet, not attending may be interpreted as a lack of love or respect. We should be very cautious here. People grieve and process differently. They should not be guilted into showing up for someone's death. And the dying person should not feel like they have to create a perfect farewell moment that satisfies everyone else. Death is already hard. Let's not turn it into a circus. Now, let's look at some real-world cases and stories that illustrate the complexity and the human dimension of euthanasia. In June 2025, Fraser Cahill, a 37-year-old man from Victoria, Australia, chose voluntary assisted dying under Victoria's recently expanded laws. Fraser has been battling terminal cancer for years and made the decision to end his suffering on his own terms. He planned to say goodbye peacefully on a beach, surrounded by his family. However, he faced unexpected obstacles. The Catholic healthcare facility where he was being treated refused to assist with the process on religious grounds, forcing him to change plans at the last moment. Despite the difficulties, Fraser's death was peaceful and dignified, highlighting both the compassionate intent behind euthanasia laws and the tensions between secular legislation and religious institutions. While I am happy that he was able to end it on his own terms, with dignity, that's exactly the type of ground exit I would never choose for myself. One of the most ethically challenging cases comes from Netherlands, where euthanasia has been legal for 2 decades. Actually, I heard this case in a different podcast. A woman with early-stage Alzheimer's disease, drafted an advance directive requesting euthanasia once her cognitive decline reached a certain point when she was no longer herself. Years later, when she reached that phase, her doctor followed through with a euthanasia request despite the woman's resistance in that moment. She did not want to die anymore. Family members and medical staff held her down so the procedure could be carried out. The doctor was later acquitted by a court, but public opinion remains deeply divided. Another case in Switzerland in September 2024, a 64-year-old American woman used a sarcopod in a remote forest near Merishausen in Switzerland. The sarcopod, it's a futuristic-looking device, which to me looks like a small escape pod from sci-fi movies. How this thing works? Well, very simplistic. People are getting in this pod, closing the lid, and then nitrogen is being released to induce hypoxia, resulting in a painless death. The technology eliminates the need for medical personnel, emphasizing absolute personal autonomy. Critics warn that the ease of access could lead to impulsive decisions or deaths without adequate psychological assessment. Proponents argue it empowers people suffering from chronic illness or severe psychological distress to take control of their own fate. These three stories show us that euthanasia is rarely simple. It involves complex legal frameworks, delicate ethical balances, deeply personal decisions, and sometimes heartbreaking dilemmas. So, where do I stand after exploring all of this? I firmly believe that everyone should have the right to choose a dignified death when they are old, sick, and suffering. It's a fundamental aspect of human dignity and personal freedom. However, I am deeply concerned about the social and familiar pressures that can influence that decision. The pressure to not be a burden, financially, emotionally, or physically, can weigh heavily on the elderly and the ill. When euthanasia becomes the expected or the easiest option, it risks transforming from compassionate choice into a forced one. I also feel uneasy about the ritualization of euthanasia. The growing expectation that family and friends attend to or participate in the final moments can be deeply painful, confusing, or traumatic for those involved. Grief is complicated enough without added social obligation or guilt. Furthermore, cases like the Dutch woman with Alzheimer's disease reminds us that consent and autonomy can be fragile, especially as cognitive decline progresses. We must approach these decisions with humility, compassion, and rigorous ethical safeguards. I really struggle with that case. I know this is a very serious subject, but I need to paraphrase my father-in-law here, as I see this case fitting exactly in that scheme. So, according to him, he only drinks 1 glass of palinka, after which he becomes a different man, who also wants a shot of palinka. And then this new person becomes a different person, and the new person wants another shot of palinka, and so on and so on. Same goes for this lady. Due to Alzheimer, she became a different person who wanted to live. The old self was already dead. So my question is, why was the wish of the sane more important than the wish of the insane. Life, death, and the question of when to call it quits. These aren't just deep topics for philosophers or late-night chats over a glass of wine. Let's be honest, deciding whether to hang on, let go, or push the big red button isn't exactly an easy one. There's a lot at play, and once you do it, there's no changing your mind. So instead of black and white answers, we get 50 shades of it's complicated.
Hi guys, it's Eva, Fabian's better half. At least that's what he calls me. So, did you enjoy the podcast? If you did, go ahead and hit that like button. Even better, rate it and subscribe. That way you'll be notified as soon as new episodes drop and you'll be helping others discover the show. If you'd like to support Fabian's Zeitgeist, you can do so by donating via the PayPal link, which is available on the podcast's website, www.fabianszeitgeist.com. That's FabiansZeitgeist. Your contribution helps ensure the continuation of the podcast and keeps the conversation going. Also, don't forget to leave us your feedback. It helps shape the direction and quality of future episodes, so feel free to share your thoughts. Until next time, stay critical, ask questions, form your own opinions, and be ready to change them if you hear better arguments. Fabian always listens, eventually, especially when I tell him he's wrong, which is often. Alright, bye guys.